Everyone, bear with me. I'm substituting tonight while Don's traveling. The time is 6:30, and I'd like to call this District 204 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Marilyn, would you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez. I know he's on.
Here.
Okay. Member Alvarez absent. Member Beta Daniels.
Present.
Member Dillon.
Here.
Member Gretsch.
Here.
Member Nava.
Here.
Member Thomas.
Here.
All right. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So Tim couldn't join in person tonight, but we do have a request to have him participate remotely due to a personal illness. May I please have a motion to approve Board Member Tim Alvarez to participate via phone conference due to personal illness?
So moved.
Second. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's gonna be like that. All right. So so we're all good then? We can move on? All right. Next item is public participation. Marilyn, do we have anyone signed up for tonight's first comment session? Okay. So then I can just skip all this. All right. Well, before we jump into our agenda, we wanted to welcome Boy Scout Troop 19. I understand you're all here for your civic action project, so welcome. Thanks for joining us. Fantastic. All right.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. It's good to see you guys.
Okay, so then we just move on to our first agenda item, which is curriculum and instruction. We'll begin with two curriculum and instruction items, starting with the first reading of the 2024-25 student fee discussion. Mr. Scott Agerty.
Thank you so much.
Scott, I already told our Boy Scouts that they would hear a riveting
I was
discussion
going
on
to say,
student
you guys
fees
picked a night.
and textbooks.
Student fees. All right. So Lyons Township High School has traditionally charged what I would say are nominal fees. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And what we're doing tonight per Board Policy 4140 is bringing forward our fee list and explaining a little bit about it to the board, clarifying kind of how our fee structures work, and answering any questions that you might have. Brian Stashak and I reviewed everything that's in our system, and this is what we're bringing forward to share and as recommendations. We have a district textbook rental. We'll talk more about that when we get to the textbook component of this meeting, but ultimately we charge students $75 fee, and that covers hard copy books, things that are used from year to year, things that we purchase and hold on to for a minimum of 5 years. That is the textbook rental. We also charge a student support fee, $25 fee. That's part of our overall registration. That includes general administrative expenses, printing, postage, and then tech expenses not related to Chromebooks. That is something we've not changed for a long time. And as far as the $75 rental fee, it's been in existence at that amount for about 14 years, and prior to that it was $100, and we decided that that was too much. So I still am not sure of any schools in the area that have reduced their fees, but this one we have kept at that 75 amount and 25 for the support fee. Those of you who are on the board, when we started our student Chromebook program, we did have a lengthy discussion about fees and about how we would go about charging for the use of that Chromebook, the software, case, charger, insurance, loaners, all the tech support and all that. We looked at a number of different schools, and ultimately we came up with an amount of $150. That's not how much it costs to buy the Chromebook, because it includes all those other things as well. So that fee includes the cost of the Chromebook, case, charger, insurance, loaner program, tech support. So those are the bulks of our fees that are listed and charged to everyone. The other component are consumables. Consumable textbooks might be a workbook, could be novels, and as we go into the textbook portion of the meeting, you'll see that we have examples here as well. We have some books like this pile on top are We will charge a flat rate, and they can choose among collection. So that's one way that we charge. You can see that in the fee structure. There's also books that we charge that everyone buys and uses. In each year, we buy new ones, and the students buy them and take them and keep them. And then usually these hardbound books are the ones that are the textbook rental. The Appendix 1 has the historical fees per course. That includes those consumables. And as we have not ordered books yet, we never know exactly what those costs are at this point. When we go to order, sometimes volume discounting will get books for cheaper. Sometimes things are out of print and we have to get a different version. Sometimes the cost has gone up. It depends on the supplier. So ultimately what we have in that list are the fees that were as last year. What we're looking to do tonight is we can go one of two ways. We're recommending that you approve the fees tonight with us having the leeway to make those adjustments as the market dictates. Or we could come back later in late April, early May with what is specifically going to be charged. We can do it either way. You'll notice perhaps that we are going to be looking to adopt some new books at our board meeting in 2 weeks that will change some of the calculations, but again, we'll build all that in. So ultimately, we wanted you to be aware of that, but that's what Appendix 1 includes. Appendix 1 also includes course material fees, so our furniture and cabinet making classes, students buy wood. In our fashion classes, fashion marketing, fashion and interior design, the students buy fabric. So there are different things where we do charge. We don't charge in every course when there are fees, or when there are consumables like that, like art supplies. A lot of times we pay for them. It really depends on budgeting and depends on the expense of those types of things. So usually the ones that we do charge for is where students have some choice. So fashion is what type of fabric are you going to purchase, and giving them the amount that they can then apply toward it. Same with wood. We do price everything for the furniture and cabinet making classes at a more affordable wood product. If they want more, they can. If they want oak, for example, they can pay for oak. But we publish and we advertise that. Other than that, we have the only other fee that everyone gets. That's an incoming freshman. It's a $30 fee for the PE uniform, lock, and heart rate monitor strap. We have heart rate monitors as class sets, but each kid has their own strap, so that's much more hygienic. And the kids know, they know the strap, they know how that works, so that's how that works. Those are the core fees, those that are part of Appendix 1. We also have a number of optional fees. Driver ed behind the wheel is $150 per student. We have the option to charge all the way up to $400. We charge really what we need, and so we've kept that relatively low as well, as a $150 with a $20 state permit fee. AP exams cost $98 each. Sometimes College Board raises that price after the spring, but for this year it was $98 with a $40 late fee. The seal of biliteracy, which is an option that students have to demonstrate that they are that they understand more than one language. They do pay for a test to prove that they are biliterate, so they have to do something to prove that they can speak English, and then the other language that they're looking to be certified biliterate. We charge $25 for those tests. Another optional fee is our publication fee. This one we're looking to move to $44. That includes a yearbook, a newspaper, and a literary magazine. The money for those publications actually goes into the budgets for each of those, for all three of those publications. Transcripts are $10. And then if a kid breaks or does anything to their Chromebook that requires repair or replacement, that's based on the specific repair or replacement needed. So I'll stop there for Appendix 1. Those are the consumables, course material fees, and then all those optional fees. Any questions on those? Yes.
General question, for the technology repair and replacement fee, is there a way that a family could purchase insurance so that they were protected?
So, Ed, do you mind jumping?
It's not something that's historically offered. It is something that has been debated as to whether we would engage an outside organization to try to self-fund that. So those conversations are ongoing.
And I guess my question is like, let's say the computer like got run over by a car, obviously it's not, you know, gonna be repaired because it's completely kaput. What would be the replacement cost on that?
Right now, if in a situation like that, it's unlikely that they would lose the charger as well, so it'd be 257.
Okay. Is there somewhere like along the way, because I mean, my concern is like, somebody drops it, falls down the stairs, breaks it, those kind of things. Is there, you know, like, is there like a contract? Is there something that goes out to them to explain to the family the
When they pick
cost?
them up.
What?
When they pick them up.
Okay, so they get, like, a replacement of this would be $250.
Yes, and those chargers are posted to the website.
Okay.
We
I just
can share the contract, I can share that with the board.
Okay.
The contract
I
that we
just like
haven't
want to
signed,
make sure
just
that
so you have the
people, one,
information.
know it, and then I
Yeah.
worry about what if there's like somebody, because, you know, that could be a significant impact. Where it could be just
And
somebody.
we will always work with.
We also build into our title funds the cost of the Chromebooks for all our students on free and reduced lunch that come in each class. So the students who are on fee waiver, the cost is picked up. And that's true for any of these costs. Students on fee waiver do not pay.
But even though on a fee waiver, like, it gets destroyed or something happens to it, then that would be my concern for the family, where one family might be able to absorb $257 better than another family might be able to absorb that cost, so.
So we have lengthy conversations about that, and if it was malicious and intentional, they do have to pay for it, and if it was not, they don't.
So there's some protection if somebody came to, I mean, that's just what I
We have the
worry.
flexibility to be able to help,
Okay,
help
that-
students
okay.
out, yeah.
Okay, I like to hear that, thank you.
But it was a good point, because even more so, is there any benefit to the district to have some kind of like group insurance that would?
When we first had that conversation, the question is, and some schools do it, some schools don't. We are dealing with Chromebooks, which are not like an iMac. So they aren't, there's not a whole lot of repair that can be done,
Okay.
and the replacement is not that expensive.
Right.
So it, you know, anytime you have those kinds of plans, you have deductibles, and
Sure.
so that's really why we haven't. That was, we went with a student grade, school grade Chromebook with a shock case, and they've actually held up remarkably well. We have had the periodic, random catastrophic problem, but very rare. And in that sense, you know, we've actually been pretty pleased. Some schools, when they first started, were having problems with Chromebooks because the screens kept breaking. We did a little higher end Chromebook that actually has a touch screen, so it has a little more oomph to it, and so we actually haven't done that. Ed, where would you say most of our breakage and?
It is actually generally in the screens, but our breakage rate is somewhere between half and three-quarters of what our peer districts have experienced based on the numbers I've been able to find from other districts.
The better Chromebook rated too, or is it just that
A little bit.
students?
I attribute it also to our students generally try to take care of,
Good.
most of our students generally try to take care of their devices.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
That's awesome. Those cases are pretty sturdy too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're so
I mean, they look like you could maybe drop them. I mean, I'm not proposing that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
They look
don't
like
advocate
those
for that.
commercials you see where you could,
Right.
you know, they could take some.
It's not a 6-foot drop, but most of the bumps are pretty well made.
Like in a backpack or something like that.
Most of them.
Okay.
For general wear and tear too, we don't give out the old Chromebooks to seniors when they leave. So we're able to triage those units and keep the best so we can use as loaner stock when things are repaired. So, we've been able to manage our inventory.
There hasn't been a lot of hiccups.
No, I mean, fewer than I thought there'd be, that's for sure.
Yeah, thanks. That's been a consistent report, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I do just have one more thing. I'm sorry about this. When you had said that you were going to come back and maybe adjust some of them, I personally would like to see that adjustment as a board when we talk about it. Instead of unilateral, like just saying, hey, whatever it is, in case there's to be a crazy outlier. So I personally would like to have us come back to review it.
Right, because you sound like you would be adjusting the standard ones that you
No.
kind of outlined, or is it in the,
Would just be in the
by the
consumer-
classes
by
that have
course.
those?
Just the consumables.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
not the
But I-
required fees would not change.
But I think that when we think back to like a year or two ago, I don't know, it all kind of blurs together. We've talked about this in the past. I think some of our concerns are, if somebody wants to take a class, like we want to give some alert to, this is a textbook that, like if you're going to take like woodworking, you know, you're going to have to purchase your wood at $200 or whatever that price may be. So I just want to make sure that,
That's the challenging part, so you
That's
can
right.
talk
Yeah,
about
so the
that.
students have already signed up for classes, so
Yeah.
they don't know any of what we're talking about.
So we would have to, we would have had to have done this back in December, January, and there would have needed to be authorization, not knowing what the costs are going to be, because we won't know those till later in the spring.
right, I mean, I know there's no way to reconcile and have it be both, to have it be, where you can put it in the book to do that. But I just think, I would like to see like, hey, we thought this one was going to be $64 and it actually turned out to be $185, so that we can kind of know what, if there should be some dramatic increase to it.
Yeah, we've not seen that. I mean,
Okay.
the increase is within $1 or two.
Right, for most of the consumables, when we're talking about the novels for, you know, the English courses, we're talking probably $1 or $2 when we place the order. We will place the order, first of all, we need to know that they're still using all of those novels, which will come into play here in the next month to 2 months. And then once we do that, we place the orders, and whatever the going rate is at the time that we place the orders is what we pay. And we don't, on those English consumables in particular, matter of fact, on all of them, we're not charging, upcharging any sort of a fee. If the novel itself is, I'm going to make this up, $6.95, we might charge $7 and round it up, you know, $7 mark, but that's it. And so it's really sort of a pass-through with us that, hey, look, this is how much the book costs us. We're selling it back to the students really for that same dollar amount. And the majority of those, you know, probably 98% of them are going to be within a couple dollar range.
Okay. So you don't, I just don't want to have a big surprise.
I mean, why don't we do this? If the board's comfortable with authorizing this between this meeting and the next meeting in April, I can share with you the difference between what the cost came back at with what you guys approved tonight, and if there's a desire to have a public discussion about it, we can bring that back.
It may even need, if we want to really
Okay.
zero it in, because of when we start ordering those materials. But we can see what we can do
Versus
for
April,
April. If
yeah.
not, May for sure. But then we also open up online registration first, but then we open up the fee payment module usually on June 1st. So that's when all of this data is you know, uploaded in May, and then that's how we build that fee structure. So when you go in to pay online for your student, all of that data is there.
So by early May, I'd be able to share with the board, here's what was different from the February discussion.
Keep in mind too, when a family goes to pay, if they still have a consumable from a brother or sister or
Right.
neighbor, or you found it cheaper online, you can choose not to pay for it. So every one of the consumables is something they can check off, keep or not keep. So that's another option as well. So, you know, it's a little more complicated that way, but we know that was always something that when we had everything in person, people would say, nope, I don't want that one, and then they check out at the end. Now, because we're doing it earlier, we've allowed that to continue.
Okay, that makes sense.
Is that a good plan then?
Yeah,
Or-
I think that works.
I'll share that with you guys
That's how
in
we
May.
approach a lot of projects, right? Like, this is the estimate, and then we reconcile it with actuals when we get
And
closer
can-
to
I'll
it.
share the cost adjustments and maybe there's only a few differences, and we can share that with the board. And
The other caveat will be, the books we'll talk about in the next item, some of them will replace things that are on that list, so those would be removed and replaced. And we will have one more round of textbook approvals, and again, those would replace things that are there already. So, and we'll talk more about that in the next one. But there will be some changes, but to your point, I don't see there being any major changes or anything that would cause anyone to question.
Well, thanks, sir, because I
Sure.
took it, there could be
like
like,
there could be big swings.
I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to have English should be like now $100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One year, just how goofy it is, one year, they were all paperbacks, and then the next year, the supplier sent hardbacks, which were the same price, which was great, but had different page numbers, and the teachers like send them back. So it's always a challenge, because the distributors, they try to come as close as possible to what you're requesting, but it's, you know, there are some of the older books, Shakespeare plays, that kind of thing, they have many, many versions and editions.
And the teacher specifies exactly what they want,
They
right?
do,
But then
they do, and-
You're saying the
and-
publisher might do a switch a little bit?
Or maybe that book just got made into a movie, and now it has a new cover, and it has new page numbers, but
Okay.
it's the same ISBN number, so all that
Got
kind of
it.
stuff is very common.
Scott, for the mandatory costs, and I'm sorry if I missed it in here, I was looking though, is there any increase for not the consumables that flex with courses, but is there any increase this year over last year? I might have,
No, not in
No.
the required fees.
Okay, that's
75
just what I
textbook,
wanted to make sure.
25 student support, 150 for tech. We are recommending a slight increase for the publication fee to 44, or was it 38?
yeah,
But that's the only one.
but not the ones at the
Yeah.
top. Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure.
I had the same exact
Yeah.
question. I think it would just, I think this is great. It would just be a little helpful if it was kind of delineated of like, these are the 23 fees, and this is what we're proposing, you know. So, just so that it's clear to us.
Scott, those required fees, when's the last time they did change?
Like it's the only time I can recall adding the 150 for Chromebook and then going from $100 to 75 for the rental. And that's, I was my 17th year doing
And
that.
that was, I think was the Chromebook fee 4 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, and I think you have supplied that a couple times for us in different iterations, Scott, like you've given like the breakdown so we can see it for year over year. But that was gonna be my question, was just
Just
that we
a
haven't
summary.
changed anything
So
from last year.
just to
for
that
mandatory.
point, everything that's attached was last year's fees.
Got it.
And we
Yeah, I
made,
mean-
the only change has been the textbook, or the publication.
Yep.
And so any updates that we would have for that second go-around would be any changes that are
Yep.
made between now and then. Any things that, we're also doing curriculum review, so there might be some things coming off, there might be new things being requested, and all that'll be in the next iteration, so.
Great.
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 So summer school is what's in Appendix 2. We haven't changed our summer school tuition either for quite some time. Actually, summer school opened today at noon, and we had over 3,000 requests
Oh my
in 2
gosh.
hours. So we're very
one of
popular for summer school.
Great.
We always are.
That's good.
And again, for that, you'll see that essentially the summer school is $240 per semester, $265 if there are supplies involved, and then the driver ed has a regular $240 tuition fee plus the traditional driver ed fees. So those are all listed as well. And then again, when we put together the fee recommendation for the technology fee that included the Chromebooks, we did do a study of what other schools charge for things, and at that point, we were among the lowest of the schools. I don't believe anyone has reduced their fees in the last 3 years since the completion of that study and the prediction of that following year. There are many fees that schools charge that we don't. There are many schools that charge fees for participation in sports and clubs, in band, music, choir, dance, all those kinds of things. We don't make any of those charges. And in fact, many schools have those fees and then have a cap, for example, of $1,000 cap for activities and clubs. And again, our initiatives to get students to be involved, and our initiatives that we show that kids actually do better when they are involved, that we don't want to make that be a barrier. So we also don't control our parking really, and so we don't charge parking fees, and so all that good stuff. So as we looked at other schools, we're pretty confident that we are being very frugal and very supportive to our kids.
Yeah.
And our camps are honestly, I don't think our summer camps. I don't think you can find cheaper camps for what you get, and so.
Oh, that's why
They're
they
great.
get filled so quick.
3,000 people lined
So we have
up.
3,000 people.
Yep,
Right.
exactly. But
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I did a little cursory, like, looking around too, just to kind of see, and you're right, those extracurriculars can really add up. I know they can cost students a lot, and I would hate to see that be a reason why a kid wouldn't join a sports activity or club. So, thank you for continuing to make that a priority, that we make those activities attainable for everyone.
Yep.
Any other questions
That's
or
all I have for
comments?
fees, yeah.
So that'll come back in 2 weeks for a second reading and approval, but then I'll share that information, the adjusted information with the board in early May.
And what I can do in 2 weeks, since we'll have the textbooks also approved, we can reverse the order. We can approve the textbooks, and then I will have already made the changes, assuming that the textbooks are approved, and so then you would be approving. And a
Actually,
more
it's
accurate,
closer.
data.
Yeah, that's great.
Updated.
I just have one quick question, and maybe it's been discussed in the past, but do any students that get free reduced lunch qualify for tuition discount or anything of the like?
Mhm. Yep,
Oh,
everything.
nice, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, we even cover AP tests. If you're on free reduced lunch, we'll pay for those as well. We're able to use some grant monies and other things for that.
Okay, great, thank
Good.
you.
Good question.
The only one I would have to check on, though, is the online consumer ed. But I think we can wait for that, too.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure.
because that's a different
You know what?
provider.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just signed up, yes, there is, you're correct. I
Yeah.
thought I saw something like that, thank you.
Got it. Yeah, that, we usually have 400 students do that.
Yeah.
In the summer as well.
That's a lot. That does get a lot of
Very
interest.
popular.
Mhm.
I know. Well, juniors or seniors could do it, so maybe a quarter.
All right, good?
Yeah.
Everybody? All right. So next, we can roll right into the next curriculum and instruction item, which is the first reading of textbook requests and instructional materials.
All right, so this is the lengthier portion, but ultimately you have some summaries. And for this year, our requests have been fairly light. I did mention that our curriculum review teams are still considering textbooks, and we have a few that are considering making some changes. Although in talking with Spanish, for example, they have listed multiple workbooks. They don't believe they need them all anymore, so they actually might reduce as far as costs go. We have some teams that are debating whether to change textbooks and may not change them this year, but next year, math is in that camp. We also have some new courses, and those new courses, one of them has a book for discussion tonight, which is the fashion merchandising class, but we also have our new AP African American Studies class that still needs a book to be selected and those kinds of things. So there will be some other changes coming, and we'll certainly adjust the textbook request for that, but at this point, the amount that we're looking at is among our lowest in the last 12 or so years. So, with the exception of 2021. What we are seeing, one of the things we do, and the reason why we're able to make our textbooks affordable is because we hold on to them for a minimum of 5 years, we're able to get the maximum life out of them. More and more textbooks, hard copy textbooks, have online ancillaries or online versions. So many times students will take their textbooks home and leave them there, and then access things there. Sometimes too, and you'll see one of those, teachers would prefer to just have a class set of the books because there is online support, and so they just want the hard copy book in the classroom, and then the student can work online. One of the things we're learning, and this is true of so many schools, there was a big push for many schools to go completely online with digital textbooks, but there really is a difference in reading comprehension and using of the book, and it's actually better to have a regular book. So in that sense, our model is still working. Our model is also unique because we do manage the textbooks. Most schools have gone out of the textbook business altogether and have adopted essentially a collegiate model, which is basically, here's the books you need, go get them. We don't have a bookstore, we're not going to help you. You know, if you're on free reduced lunch, we'll have things for you, but other than that, you're on your own. What that tends to mean is when you have a $180 Algebra 2 book, like we do have, you're on the hook for a $182 Algebra 2 book for your 1 year of taking Algebra 2, and then you can pass it along to a friend or try and sell it on the secondary market or find a used version somewhere, whereas our students would have that access to that book and we would use it year over year. So in that sense, the reason why this works is we have the stockpile of text. So if you come here in the summer and go in the cafeterias, you're going to see piles and piles and piles of textbooks. No school would go to this having gone away from it because you would need to buy all those textbooks. So by doing this incrementally over time, we've been able to manage this textbook stock and really keep this relatively affordable. The one thing that is changing, though, are more and more I don't even want to say, I'll call them course materials that are a combination of many things. And you're going to see in our proposals here, especially in our LIFE program, that's what they're looking for. They have hard copy books in the classroom. They have online tests and online assessments and online diagnostics and online lessons, and then supports that the teacher have for how to modify lessons. So it's a much more interactive and computer-based with the printed word ancillary to go with it. Those tend to be a little more expensive and might be an annual fee, and you'll see those in a couple of the proposals in our LIFE program. Others are, we've been trying to figure out how to give students some choice. Our English teachers have the luxury, because our students do purchase a lot of their novels, of being able to write in books, of being able to take notes, and, you know, again, things that we want to teach them to be able to do for when they go to college. But we also want to give students some choice. So often we'll have 4 or 5 different options, and the students will pick one. We'll charge a flat fee for that one, and then the cost of those books will more or less even out that difference. In the past, when we try to do it a different way, we would want kids to order what they wanted, and then we would order the books, and then a kid would transfer, and it got to be really messy. We order the books that we need, and then they're able to make some choices. So that's been useful too. Our textbooks, we do have 3 categories. We have the district text, and that is the one that $75 fee is for. Those are textbooks that last for a minimum of 5 years, generally are hardbound, and are what you would normally think of as a textbook. We have class sets, which may be novels, which may be anthologies, could be a large textbook. Those are kept in the classroom, and a lot of times the teachers will just keep class sets, and students will access the online versions at home. Class sets are purchased by the district and a part of the district purchase, so we do not pass that charge on to students. And then there are the consumables, could be workbook, could be a novel, all those kinds of things. So I've categorized all of the requests that way as well. So we have district text, class sets, consumables, and then other books that we've dropped. And then you also have in your packet, broken down by the division, what the requests are. Essentially, what we're looking at are, like I said, not all that many changes in our district text, the relatively expensive courses. You'll see that English 4H Spanish book is $171.75, right? So that's not uncommon, especially for language books. So we do have an enrollment of 110 in that class because it is a book that our Spanish 3H uses this year. They're familiar with it. We just need to buy them for the 4H class as well. So that is actually nearly a third of all of our textbooks for this year.
Yeah.
in one book. So as you can see, it adds up pretty quickly, some of these texts. Those special education district texts, those are the ones that are an annual purchase and then are used to individualize the work in the life, English, math, reading, social and work skills classes and home living. So they are really designed, though, and our life program went through a curriculum review last year, really is able to focus on the individual needs of a kid, being able to do the diagnostics, being able to measure growth, and meet their needs more individually. So those you'll see are an annual cost. So like, for example, the Unique Learning Systems is $754.99 annually. That is something we'll be purchasing next year and the year after, as long as we keep it, and then every student has access to it. And that also is a part of that district purchase. There are also some that are priced by student. So we have the Transition Assessment and Goal Generator Assessment Suite, or TAG, for $2 per student. We have 39 students in that class, so the estimated cost there is $78. So that one's not so bad. But it does come along with other things that we purchase, which is why it is what it is. So all of those are in our special ed area this year, but that is becoming more of a model. So I do see us possibly moving in that direction with some other texts in the future. We talked a little bit about this at the LT Community Advisory Council. How do we make sure we have textbooks that are modern, up-to-date, well-connected, well-researched, well-sourced, and that give the teachers the ability to meet the needs of all learners rather than just sort of hitting a particular target audience. So I think we're going to see that more and more. These actually I see as being relatively reasonable. A lot of times with software, we wouldn't bring software through this process. We have a software budget process. And we see things for software being much more expensive than that. Or it would be something that like every student in the school would use, and it's $250 a kid, and those numbers really add up. So I think these are really reasonable. And I don't know, Leslie, if you're familiar with some of these things that they're looking to bring in. They really seem like they're going to meet the individual needs of kids better.
So you mean that would go beyond the special ed division? Is that what you mean? Like there's
Not
opportunities
these
beyond
particular
that?
texts,
Okay.
but going forward, we
Right.
may see this model more
Yeah.
in textbooks.
Okay. That'd be interesting to see, because I'd be curious how that would affect like kind of the bottom line of how much we usually spend annually.
Yeah, so, and that was something we were kind of trying to feel out the Community Advisory Council about, because we have parents and students, community members there too, like what would you like? And they really said, we want the best stuff. I mean, we want current.
Of course.
Current events and current information,
Yeah.
and we don't want a book from 1985, that that kind of thing, which certainly we don't either. But again, I think it's the textbook companies kind of they are starting to find a sweet spot. At one point, they were charging the exact same amount for online as a hard copy.
Yeah.
There were people doing more workarounds, and I know at the college level, kids just stopped buying books. That was another problem. Kids would just borrow or
Open source, try to
find out
get
what
it,
you really
yeah.
need. And actually, Amazon will loan you a chapter at a time if you want. You don't need the whole book. So, part of this process too is a public process. We want to make sure that our community has access to what we are looking to purchase. So, for example, the lifeguarding, American Red Cross lifeguarding manual is on here. It is free, but we want people to know what's available in our classes, and so it's on here even though it's free. And then we have some new course, our new exercise physiology class, which is a $104 book, replacing a 13-year-old book, which again, that's good.
Right.
Those are the district far as class sets go, intro to the fashion merchandising class, this book is the book that COD uses. It's a dual credit course, and a lot of times our dual credit courses will tell us which book we need to use, so that's there. The World History Cross Cat has a textbook, and they're just wanting to make it a class set, so this happens a lot of times too. They just want to change the designation. They weren't sending it home with kids, or they were sending it home and the kids weren't using it, so they're going to just keep it in the classroom. We'll be able to hopefully sell the extras. And then that sports medicine will also be, that intro to sports medicine book will be a class set as well. It's not something that you necessarily have to take home. And lastly, we have consumables. They're all in the English area. We have In the Time of Butterflies, which is coming in for English Language and Comp AP, and that is replacing The Awakening. So we've had that one in for 21 years as The Awakening. So that's just a replacement. The 3 books, Crying in H Mart, The German Room, and They Call Us Enemy, those 3 books are a choice, so the students can pick any one of those 3 for $16, so that students will pay $16, they could choose any one of those 3. And then they're also adding the things she's seen to that course as well, which is $8.52. And then the things that we're dropping are listed here as well. So anything that's being dropped that was a consumable will come off of the list we just talked about. And anything that's coming out that is a district text, we will try to sell to a reseller. So those are the requested texts. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So I'm just curious, so the dropped books are dropped because they're just determined they're not needed from a context standpoint, or they're being switched? And I think maybe you might have said that.
A little bit of both. So, for example, the Spanish 4 book is being replaced because it's a college text and they've moved to the new version. The Intro to Sports Medicine and Exercise Physiology are 13 years old, so we're removing those. The Social Awareness and Perspective Taking course and the Advanced Social Awareness classes, those books are being changed by the ones that we're purchasing through that subscription. And as English 2 Crosscat hasn't been, they haven't really liked Sunrise over Fallujah. Kids don't really care for it, so they're just dropping it and using something different that they have in the classroom already. So, and then The Awakening, we mentioned, is being replaced by In the Time of Butterflies. So usually things are dropped and replaced by something else.
Thank you.
I always love seeing the new textbooks
Yeah.
and the summer reading, because then I get my reading
Yeah.
for
I know, I've
the
been
next
wanting to
several
read the
months.
George Takei book forever. I might sneak that before I give it back.
Crying in H Mart is good.
There you go.
Yeah.
I have a question, but this is a good time.
Sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Everybody can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Go for it.
Okay. So first of all, I really appreciate what the teachers have put in on these requests, particularly the kinesiology book and looking at lexile levels and readability, and it's a challenging course. So I think all that information was very helpful for us to reinforce the work that our teachers are doing to ensure the curricular materials our kids are accessing are appropriate, adequate, support their learning and development. I also really appreciate the English department and work that they've done to look at their novel list, to create opportunities for students to be able to choose novels that better replicate their lives' experiences, to diversify their access to novels and literature that not only better reflects their lives, but on the other side of exposing kids to the world outside of LaGrange and Willow Springs and all of our communities. Because there's a huge world out there. I think a lot of places that they're doing have done a remarkable job in our students. So I'm very appreciative of that. My only question is, and you may have said this next, is any of these new textbooks, we're doing a first reading right now. Eventually, will those then go on 30-day display?
They'll be on display from now until the board meeting in 2 weeks. They'll be here in the boardroom.
We're actually looking at some of them right now, Tim.
They're right here.
Okay. And so procedurally, we don't have to have them on display for 30 days before approval?
No, we've had them, when we've done first and second readings from, say, January to February, or February to March, we have. In doing it this way this year, we're certainly following our policy by having them on display. But again,
Got it.
we didn't have anything that said 30 days specifically.
Yeah, we can review that, but that's not our understanding. It has to be 30 days. So, but I can go back and review that.
I'm sure I'm confusing policies with my own school district, so I apologize.
Okay.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Sure. Anybody else? Any
No,
questions?
Tim said it really well.
I would just say when looking at so I appreciate everything going through. It's exciting to see new books. From all my years in school, it was my favorite thing to get new books. But I don't know what to say. But when you look at the forms that you have, like the forms that are submitted for a change form, I would just ask that they be in compliance, because I would think that you would want to make sure that everything was recommended, approved, and approved, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. I don't see everything as checked.
Yeah, they will be for the final.
Okay.
And I've got a couple of them marked. We also are working with, and this has been the challenge of any form, are signatures, signed forms versus digital forms, and versions tend to change over what got printed versus what got signed versus what had an X on it and now it doesn't. And so I've got 4 to fix. And
Okay.
I'm ready to
Bring
go.
back clean copies for the 20th. We can bring back.
That's
the
why
clean
some of
copies.
them are a
Yeah.
little darker too, because we don't have a digital that's clean. So again, we're doing our best, but there still really isn't a good digital way to sign things.
So it's all done paper?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my only.
All right.
Yeah. I think
So,
Come
we're
back in
good.
2 weeks for
Yeah.
second reading and approval.
All right.
Yeah, it
The
looks
books will
great.
be here in the boardroom, so anyone wants to
It's
come.
2 weeks, so stop on by and check them out.
Perfect. All right. Well,
Thank
thank you. Okay, so moving on to our last agenda item really is the discussion about the Willow Springs property. So at our last meeting, we talked about next steps in exploring a possible sale in Willow Springs, and the board agreed that it would like to gather community input about the potential sale of the property and asked Dr. Waterman to outline an approach on what that engagement process might look like. So, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, as Jill said, 2 weeks ago, the board talked about some next steps. James Levy and Kevin Gordon were here to assist with that discussion. In the last 2 weeks, we've done exactly what the board talked about, which was put together a draft RFP that could be sent to the street to solicit proposals for a firm that could help the board with a community engagement process. I shared that draft RFP with the board last Wednesday. It's also in the board packet. And really, I kind of look at the purpose of tonight is to provide me with any feedback for that RFP. And then honestly, whatever other topics related to the property the board would like to discuss. So with that, I think just open it up and see if there's any feedback on the proposal or any other comments or thoughts. And then I guess one other thing is, I put a very rough timeline in the email that could be used, but that's also something that can be completely revised at the discretion of the board.
Thanks for doing that.
I would just add that I appreciate the discussion we had last time regarding this, and I really think, with the approach of getting someone to engage all of the communities into having this be done, and I really appreciate it, and I thought it really accurately covered what I feel like we discussed here, and I appreciate the timeline being prompt. I think time is of the essence.
Piggybacking off that too, I agree. I think the RFP is reflective of that whole conversation, and but I also want to make sure, and I think this will happen as this moves on. The point was made at the last board meeting, but I mean, we know it and we've heard it. We have a lot of feedback. So would all be curious, as with whomever we work with, how do we take what we've heard and what we know and then find the gaps where we want to make sure that we cover all of our bases too. Like, we have a lot of we're not starting from ground zero, is just the point that I want to make when we're moving forward on this. But we have gaps to fill, and we want to make sure that we cover all our bases.
And I think that was kind of the point, is just that really targeted approach that someone who's going to have from an outsider's perspective of being able to connect with stakeholders that represent all the members of the communities that we serve. So I think, and having probably a multi-pronged approach of how that is done is really huge, because I think too, a lot of times you have participation that might come in. I mean, participation is going to come from someone who's actively engaged and aware. So I think part of what this firm could provide for us is awareness too, to people who might otherwise really be paying attention. There's probably plenty of people who maybe don't have students in the district, at our school, but that might just not really be paying attention to what's going on and would like to have an opportunity to speak. So gathering that kind of information, I think, is really critical, and having it come from someone who works on gathering that data in an equitable approach, is really, really important here.
Absolutely.
I think, my only comments about the RFP, and I did actually send an email back about it, was just the length is pretty long. It's I think there's some redundancy in the content, and I think we can clean that up a bit. I know that having been a person who responds to RFPs, that the clearer and more succinct it is, the quicker it is to be able to respond to that. And because our timeline is such that it's a little tight, I think, what do we have here suggested, like a 2-week turnaround, I think, for these people. That I think if we can clean through and get a little bit more specific about what it is that they have to include in that RFP very quickly as a high list, we'll get a better variety of people who will be able to actively engage in it. Because if some people look at it and think this is overwhelming, it may not be worth their time to start because the timeline's so tight. We want to make sure we give them enough time to feel that they can accurately respond. And I think we'll get that kind of information from them based on how thorough these questions really are.
And just for the board's sake, Carrie had sent some suggestions today that gets at what she was just talking about, like the streamlines, it takes out some of the redundancy of questions. We've already made those changes.
Right.
My plan was to get other feedback tonight and turn around a final draft to you guys tomorrow and make sure everyone has 24 hours to look at it and then approve it, and then we would get it out on the street.
Well, I think after seeing how you went through all of the policies, I think you're a good person.
I was checking all the double spaces, the
Right,
extra spaces, missing punctuation.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I guess, and the one thing I just wanted to make sure, Brian, I know I sent some of those things to you, but there was one thing from a clarity standpoint on page, I guess it's page 2, for references and materials. We have provide samples of the communication materials developed for the above references. So we're asking them to tell us which school districts that they've worked with, which I think is a very valid and very, very valuable measure for us to evaluate them from. But then samples of the communications materials, I'm not sure we need that. I think finding out which list that they worked with as the references should be sufficient.
I
Because
took
we
that
could
out
have.
based upon your
Okay,
suggestions,
perfect,
yeah.
great, thank you. And because I wasn't sure really if I needed to ask you what we were trying to clarify there, but I also think we don't need it.
So the only question,
Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
the only question that I have, I think it's a lot of good information. How are we getting this out and disseminating this out so that we can attract the interest of the expertise of folks that we're trying to get to engage in?
It's a great question. I had that on my list. So I have a list of companies that James and Kevin have given me, but I'm open for ideas on anyone else. We'll certainly post this on our website. We'll think of other creative ways to get the word out so everyone knows about it. But if you guys know of companies out there that specialize in this work, please let me know.
I want to go back to when you're talking about communication materials. I actually think that's important if we're talking about how do they recommend we engage. I mean, it's not just the tactics, but then the messaging around it. I would look at it like almost like a portfolio. I would.
Oh, like a case study?
Yeah, I would. I would
Sure,
be
I
very
could see
interested
that.
in that because
Yeah.
that matters.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. I thought that it was more like, what would reports look like, which, I mean, those are things that we,
Oh, I was looking at it as soliciting our community to come
Okay.
together in any of these
and the
number
tactics
of
that they
tactics
use
that
for
they're
each of
going
those.
to use.
Certainly,
Yeah.
but they might customize it based on what they think they need.
Well, I would
for
hope
assessing
so.
us first.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess you're right. We could see that, and also be curious, like the timeline too of the process that they used.
Yeah.
With different schools.
So do we want to add that line back in? Is that what you're?
I think it can
Maybe it's
you
not
guys could
clear
maybe
enough.
be tweaked a little bit, whether it's case studies or samples, portfolio,
case studies,
whatever.
yeah,
That
is
would,
pretty-
I think that would fit the bill. It's one thing to come back with a response to your proposal, but, we also want to be able to evaluate
No, I agree.
in real time.
I agree, because from previous proposals, I've learned a lot from looking at case studies, what looked like case studies, and I think that's very beneficial.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
definitely something, kind of shows a proven track record, other than a list of reference that,
Right.
we don't know
Right.
the outcome, we don't know. Yeah.
Cool.
This was really
I
thorough.
just-
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tim.
So I just have a few thoughts on this. And I don't want to open up a whole nother can of worms, but I think it's important for us to talk about it. I know we've talked about the idea of, first of all, are we interested in selling this property? And I think the community engagement will help us get to that question. I do think that's a question we have to ask, but I'm also wondering, and I've myself escalated on this back and forth about the idea of an appraisal at the current zoning. I know we've talked about it a lot. You guys have talked about it well before I've been sitting on this board. But I'm almost wondering if now is the time to do that, either before we vet out this RFP or in conjunction with doing the RFP or before the RFP, because I feel like it's a major piece that's missing in the discussion that may be valuable to us to the engagement of the community. The other part of me also wonders, and I know we've heard from a lot of the community at previous board meetings before I was on and during, certainly it hasn't, I'm sure, represented the entirety of the district. You can't do that at a board meeting very easily. And I think there's value to that, to getting community engagement. But I'm also wondering if there's a way that we can do that without spending more money on a firm that will help us to engage that community. And I'm new guy, so I have not sat where a lot of you have been sitting for the last couple of years. And it's been a challenge, and I understand that, but I also wonder if it's not worth a discussion maybe after we get the RFP to determine whether or not we still need that. But I think an important question to discuss tonight would be, do we want to consider doing a appraisal at current zoning either before, after, or concurrently with the RFP?
I mean, I would just add a couple of thoughts on that. I appreciate you bringing up both of those points. I mean, I would be in favor of an appraisal. I don't have a sense of urgency like right now before we engage with somebody, but I think that would be really helpful if we're pulling people together in whatever the format is. It's hard for people to respond, and we've heard this, so we know it's hard for people to respond if they don't really understand, what are the parameters around that, right? So I think having that appraisal would be helpful information for that work. And then the second point about how much of this could we do on our own, I mean, in just my own opinion, I don't think this is our wheelhouse or anybody's in the administration to do something like this. However, if we get the RFPs back and there's a laundry list of tactics and we're looking at the bottom line, are there some things that could be absorbed? I think that is a good conversation to have. We won't know.
Right, or you could get the RFP back and there's nobody out there that can do what we're looking for. So I think we need to do the RFP
Process.
and see
Yeah.
what comes back. You know, I don't necessarily have, it would be needed to have the appraisal at the current zoning, if you get further into.
Yeah.
Depending on either way that you go, so, I think it could be concurrently. I don't think you need to wait until we get this information back, because we don't know what's gonna come back.
I think I still would wait probably to see what we get with the RFPs, and if there's someone that is worthy of engagement that we decide that we like or we want to, I would want them to weigh in on some of that, about why they would value that or how they would use that data or that information as part of the process. So I personally, I think I would just wait on the appraisal until we go through the RFP, see if there's anybody worth engaging with, and then see if they have a recommendation about how that piece fits in and where they would use that kind of information.
I think we're the ones that have to determine.
Yeah, that kind of, I think it would, that is now asking, because this proposal to me looks like it's tackling marketing communication type of firm, but now asking them, that's almost like technical advice in my opinion, like kind of almost weighing in on how to use the appraisal. I think it could go either way, but I think it's a fine line. And for me, I'm like, well, I would want to see more level of expertise that I don't necessarily know if a marketing communication is being, you know, unless it was a land use consultant conducting, you know, the type of research. So I think it would depend at the end of the day, right? It really does depend on what we get in the RFPs, what we see. We don't know what we're gonna get. But I do have one, and I'm not against an appraisal. I mean, I think it's good information to have. It would be helpful to know. And then I do have one question. I think that this was very well put together, very thorough. I don't know if just this year, with me listening to the discussions, if I've also, if maybe everybody has thought out loud, you know, when you're so immersed, you think out loud. But to me, I gather that there's already been a good amount of money estimated for improvements that have been deemed necessary by the community. And I think we need to keep reminding the community as a whole of what already the community has agreed the schools need and what that dollar amount is, phase 2 and phase 3. Because if I'm not mistaken, one of the considerations is, I mean, we don't have the money to pay for phase 2 and phase 3. So money is an issue. And, you know, depending on what we do with this land, those enhancements, it's going to help pay for those, you know, already agreed upon by the community enhancements that the schools need. So I don't know if this is a time to do it here. There is, the problem statement does say that the background, somewhere in the background, it does state that we will use for the potential vacant and unutilized asset to support the district's ability to maintain and enhance our schools and deliver the excellent education our community and students deserve and expect from District 204. So I think that's great, but I still don't think it drives the point home. I think it needs to be crystal clear at some point, and maybe it doesn't need to be part of the RFP, but if we do engage a community, you know, an agency, when they go out and do their, you know, questions, like, I think it needs to be very clear to the community and to everybody, you know, what, one of the challenges and the parameters for the land, how we plan to use that money. I don't know if that makes sense.
So like phase 2 and phase 3, like, that was still like, my understanding, it was like kind of the pie in the sky. It wasn't necessarily that, and that was like every single thing. That was not
Yeah.
like what we have identified specifically that must happen.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
finish
no,
up, then
no.
I'm gonna provide some
So
clarity
like
on this.
phase one
Yeah.
and like phase two were, but like that kind of three and that whole $85 million that you know people are keying in on are not necessarily what the board has looked at, from my understanding and being on the board over the last 2 years, as what must happen.
Right. Yeah, so just
Well, thank you for
cl-
clarifying me.
So, yeah, just add a little more context and
Right.
clarity to that. Phase one is approximately a $44 million project that's 3 years long.
Okay.
And it's projected
Oh, no,
to start
right.
this summer.
Right.
Phase two is everything in addition to that won't be accomplished in phase one, but I think a great way to look at this is it's not all new things. For example, we're renovating and modernizing 64 classrooms as part of phase one. We have a lot more classrooms than 64. That's all in phase two. So it's not necessarily new projects. A lot of it is just completing what we're not able to do in phase one. Like we know after phase one, we're gonna have additional air conditioning needs as well, that we're not gonna be 100% air conditioned at both campuses after we after we complete phase one. Certainly, there are some other projects in there, but it's honestly completing. So I would argue that there's certainly some desires in there, but there's a lot of needs in there as well that are going to be necessary.
Well-
The other thing I want to clarify,
Yeah, go ahead.
none of that, I didn't build that into the RFP. So there's no part of the RFP that has anything to do with facilities. It's
No, I see.
it's community engagement around the perceptions around the property. But that's the purpose of tonight. So if the board wants this RFP to read different, then we can do that.
I'm not necessarily saying that I want it to read different. I just want it, in my opinion, I think if we were to engage, if we like the RFPs and we were to engage a firm when we're getting ready to go out to the community, I thought it was important, I assumed, and I probably have, misconstrued some of the, my short time here, I've probably misconstrued some of those, phase one, phase two, phase three. I guess, bottom line, I would like to know I would like to put a dollar amount on what is needed and what we don't have money to pay for. Because to me, I think there is, I don't think you could totally have it independent. I don't think it's having the whole picture, if you just talk about the land itself.
So real
Because-
quickly, that projected number is 85 to 100 million. That's
But-
part of phase. But now there's been no,
I do,
it is,
yeah.
it's incredibly expensive to have architects put detailed plans in place for that. So we haven't taken that step yet, nor I don't think we want. But the projected costs that
Yeah.
they've put on those projects are 85 to 100 million.
Well, yes, I have seen that, but like Michael just explained, those are not musts. So I don't know that as a board, I would like to know as a board what is interpreted as what is needed of those phase two, phase three, because I thought all of it at some point we would want to get it done, that it's needed, right?
Yeah. Certainly there's an argument to be made. that it's
So
needed.
and then I also thought we didn't have the money to pay for it,
Right.
So.
We have not had, the board's not had discussions around funding sources for phase two.
Right, and I know it's down the
Yeah.
road, but I think, I'm gathering that if we were to sell this property, it would be used for
That's what
those.
the board has outlined, since the
Is-
beginning
is
of
that-
this. That
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I've captured
From the
that
beginning, the
correct.
board
For
has
sure.
been clear that any proceeds from the sale would be used towards upgrading facilities.
Okay,
Yeah.
I guess,
But here's what I would say, I think what the board needs to discuss right now, to Elvia's point, is, does that change? Because to me, I look at that as a whole different discussion.
yeah, and it could be,
But if it's,
yeah.
but if it's a similar discussion, then I think the board needs to talk about that, and we need to revise the RFP to include, because I've not included that part into this.
I think this RFP is about engaging our community, like, full stop on this.
On one topic, on the property.
Topic, right? Part of that is, why are we even having the conversation? Yes, funding source, things like that. But what I heard you say when you're talking about that, that's a lot about, like, messaging, and what's really important, and another reason to work with an outside firm, is there can't be like an agenda. It has to be, listen, what does everybody want to say? These are all the different ways, and then evaluating that data, and then the board using it to make a decision. Are we going to sell? Are we not going to sell? What direction is it going to go? And then I think there's a communications and a messaging strategy around that. I feel like what you're talking about is the next step after you gather all of this information, but I would not be in favor of hiring somebody that's going to go out with any kind of crafted message, because I don't think anybody around this table would agree on even what that would be.
Well, and I brought it up as I saw it outlined here as like a problem stated, like giving the background.
Yeah.
So I was not necessarily saying, I kind of said maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm bringing it up for clarity, for my own purposes, because I feel like throughout it hasn't been delineated. And so as a board member, I'd like some clarity at some point, and maybe not tonight, this is not the time, but I just didn't want to, in my opinion, going down the road, that would not be good enough for me. That's all I'm saying. And this is probably not the time to have that discussion. I'm getting ahead of myself, so that's okay.
But I think it's
Yeah.
important too, making sure, we revisit, our whole
Yes.
space on the website, and where we talk a lot about why this, how this conversation has evolved too. Have we been clear with some of the numbers there and things like that too? I think that's worthwhile.
That's it. But thank you, Brian. Very good questions. They're very detailed. So I think we should be able to glean some very good information.
I mean, I think, it's pretty clear right here in that problem statement on the very first page, what we're asking from the firm. In order to provide the district with the insight necessary to make future decisions regarding the Willow Springs property, the district is looking for a community engagement and research firm to analyze, develop, and execute a comprehensive plan that will collect perceptions, opinions, and ideas regarding the Willow Springs property from all District 204 stakeholders. And that gets at the point that I know Tim was trying to make, that we've heard input and we have. But again, I'm looking for someone who will be, finding the ways to get to the people who are not always dialed in and paying attention, and knowing that they can come to a board meeting and tell us how they feel. So there's other ways to get data and to collect information, and I'm looking for an expert that will help us gather that data and information.
Yeah, just to go back to that, because Elvie, you mentioned the problem statement a couple times. Do you have suggested revisions to the problem statement, or are you comfortable with how it reads now?
No, because it looks like there's going to be an opportunity for us to revisit that, and it's more down the road, I think. Yeah, so for purposes of the RFP, I think it's fine. Thank you.
And I'd like to say for the problem statement, like kind of hearing, I think, like piggybacking on you, Joe, I think it's good that it's not for the sale. The ideas regarding the Willow Springs property that we're not, there's been people that have come and said, we want to make it a nature center.
Right.
And I think it's really important just to keep it really basic first, because maybe it's not about fun. It's first of all, does the community want to hold on to this property? Do they have other great ideas?
Good point.
Of what to do with it? I think that we need to step back and say, first step is, and kind of maybe what Tim had said initially is, we need to use this information, I feel. Do we want to sell this property?
Right.
And maybe there's different things, and you give a forum for somebody to say something that may not be what they were comfortable, or you get into maybe there's gonna be some kind of, I don't know, like, the city, meeting, town hall type meeting, and people are like, oh my God, that would be amazing if we could do X, Y, and Z there, and just to really get those ideas, because I don't want to go into this with the assumption, because we wouldn't need it. We don't need it if we're going into it with the assumption of it's going to be sold.
Right.
I think we have to go into it with a really blank slate of
Stepping it back.
What?
To step back even further.
I think so. I
Yeah.
really do. I think we need to really step back and hear from everyone. Like, what do they want to do with it? Maybe 90% say we absolutely want to sell it. and then maybe another 10% say something else, but we need to hear from all those people, and that's why I think it's so important to me that we hear from the community here, instead of just making that leap to, we're going to assume that the community wants it sold, and we're going to use that for stage 2 and stage 3 type of thing. I think just stepping back.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. I just think all of the information, all of it needs to be available to the community, everything, in every regard, that's all. So, yeah.
I mean, this is gonna sound crazy, but I actually recall hearing from somebody saying once, what? LT owns land somewhere? I mean, sounds crazy, but I think some people, because it's, you know.
It's not, I mean,
not out
until
of-
the last few
right.
years, a lot of people,
Didn't, right,
you know,
talk
think
about
across
there's
the
still some
district
people out there.
might
Right.
not have known, yeah.
If you're not, if you're not online, I think if you, honestly, like if you were a community member that didn't have any social media presence, you might not, and you didn't have a kid that came here,
Right.
you might not have any knowledge about any of this. So I think that's why it's important to engage everybody.
If we
I'm
can.
for this.
It is, but I also want to make sure that we have to acknowledge, like, we aren't at ground zero too, because there's, is one community that is very vocal, rightfully so, and you know, need to be front and center and all of
I
that.
mean, I think they have to come in knowing that there's been a pass with this.
Of course.
But starting with a neutral ground to gather that information.
Yeah.
Not with a preconceived notion of X, Y, or Z.
Maybe, you know what, because I think, Carrie, you brought this up, and it makes a lot of sense. Right on the second bullet, Brian, where you say, how do you reach out to varied community members to ensure a balanced cross-section of representatives attend focus group sessions? I think that's a great question. I just wonder if we also need to go as far as asking, how do you reach, you know, how do you ensure a representation of all the communities? Something to the effect of, you know, when it's a challenge. I don't know how to phrase it. I'm not very good with the wordsmithing. I'm not going to have those perfect words right now. But something to the effect of, give us an example of situations in which you have dealt with, you know, how do you get to reach to those hard
Yeah.
to reach communities, hard to reach, you know, section of people.
Do you think we've captured that by saying, how do you ensure all voices are heard, not just those who might dominate conversations?
I guess it is good, but I feel like I keep hearing, you know, that's kind of one of the things that I keep hearing resonate, you know, from the board here. So I feel like we almost need to make it, we are doing this not just, it's a very targeted purpose that we want to hear from everyone. It's so important that I think we almost need to have a targeted question. I don't know if it's rephrasing that one or adding to it. And maybe I have to think about it, and I'll email you. But
Yeah, yes,
In
right
the
now,
second-
it just says, how do you ensure all voices are heard, not just those who might dominate conversations? And it says, how do
Wait,
you
where
reach out?
Where do you, sorry, where?
So
That's
it's
just
on-
above, I think.
It's on page 2, under the questions, it's in the area that says experience.
Experience,
So it's
hold on,
this-
maybe
So second bullet point says, describe your organization's experience, and then the second bullet, actually the first bullet point under there has
Oh, yeah,
4
yeah,
questions
yeah,
related. So then
yeah.
it goes on to say, how do you
Reach varied
out to
community
varied
member-
community members to ensure a balanced cross-section of representative respondents from each community within the district?
I mean, it is,
I think
Yeah.
that's a good question, because that's going to allow the response.
Yeah.
So what we get back from them is going to help us to determine if they are really looking at things from that equity lens that we're looking for.
Right.
So I think the way that Dr. Waterman worded that question is going to allow them to, without us feeding that information, see what they are going to provide to us.
Right.
oh, so maybe
That's-
even better that way, so that we don't lead them into it to
Absolutely.
get, to spoon feed the question that the answers we're looking.
Yes, so I think
Okay.
the way that's phrased,
Okay.
that way we'll see what they return to us.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's true, we don't want to kind of spoon feed them into
No,
what
we
what
need
wanna
to keep
hear
it
either.
broad enough for them
No,
to be
that's
able to
true.
tell us how they'll
Okay.
do stuff.
That makes a lot of sense, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, then we're fine. There was a lot of thought you put into this, Brian, and the team, I'm sure, so. Sometimes it takes a team, right, then to come back.
Always the team.
Can we talk a little bit about this timeline? I wanted to discuss that for,
I still think you guys probably need to talk about the appraisal, because I didn't get clarity on that. I
Oh.
heard 3
Yeah, you're
yeses, I
right.
heard
Oh,
one maybe,
sure.
and I heard no, and one didn't
Maybe
talk.
we need to
So,
talk.
Yeah, so I need some clarity on that.
We didn't talk.
Do we want to
I don't
finish the
think you did,
RFP?
did you? No, you didn't talk, did you? Did you give your opinion? No, Jill.
About the appraisal?
Yeah, did you give
Oh, I'm
your?
not for the appraisal right
Okay,
now.
okay, so that's,
I was
so,
like, wait.
let me add that. Yeah, I didn't think you'd said
Okay, yeah, no,
anything.
and I think when we go back to like what the lawyers had said, is they didn't feel like that was something we needed to focus on too. I think there was a discussion about that last meeting, and it's really, I mean, you could have a big, huge swing with demand for the appraisal. I feel that that's, because the appraisal to me assumes that that the community wants to sell it. So I think the first thing is, when we look back at that, what do we want to do with it?
right.
So,
I'm not
yeah,
for the
so I've
appraisal.
got three supports, 2 no's, and I wasn't clear on whether you support it or not.
Well, actually, are we all clear on those 3? Because I thought I was one of those 3. I actually
Wait, who
haven't
said
heard.
no?
I thought you said agreed concurrently.
That's why I'm saying.
Correct.
Jill agreed, and Tim agreed.
Okay,
So that was
so-
the 3, so I wasn't clear on what your
I
answer was.
wanted to wait, yeah.
And you were no,
Okay,
and
so
Jill
for
was a
now.
no. That's what I have.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So then okay, I'm a yes.
You're a yes, okay. So that's, what I will do is I'll bring some information back to the board about getting an appraisal. As we've been down this road before, there's a lot of different options here, so I'll have to communicate with you guys what type of appraisal you want. There's a current value, there's market conditions, we know that the proposal we got back in the fall, there was the one individual who was willing to do 3 different appraisals at different values, so I'll share that based on tonight, I'll share that information with the board later this week.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think that's, yeah, I think get the RFP going, and that's a separate,
Yep.
I mean, related, but a separate conversation.
Okay.
I think my only comment I want to make about this timeline, so if Brian is still going to be comfortable sending out and posting the RFP this Wednesday, does that still seem doable for everybody? Yeah?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I
what-
don't-
Don't have very many changes.
So I don't feel like there's really any changes to
Okay.
make. I'm gonna
Okay.
send you guys a final version of the RFP tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask everyone to put their
Okay.
eyes on it before the end of the day tomorrow, and then we can get it
Okay.
out
Yeah.
Wednesday.
That's great. And then I think where I get a little bit tripped up here is that if the deadline for the firms is the 23rd, and then we're talking about, potentially having a board discussion that March meeting, I just feel like that might be a little bit of a crunch. I guess I'm a little worried that, because,
Do you think it'd be a crunch for the board, or
um,
you guys need more time to review those RFPs?
well, I mean, just because it says in selection of final candidate, if we talked about as part of this RFP that we might need to see these people or talk to them and bring them in. So that, I think, would impact these dates realistically. You know what I'm saying?
It might add, I think it would add time after, like, between that March 5th meeting.
Uh-huh.
Then I think that we're good up through March 5th probably, but if we do, based on that discussion, we might need a little wiggle room.
Right, like there may be something that comes into play at that March 5th discussion where we're like, you know what, we want to see, or we need a little bit more back. Because we talked about either possibly having to do follow-up questions, I mean, just allowing for enough time for that before we just like go and engage with somebody if there's additional questions. Because I don't know that it allowed for the fact that, okay, let's just say we got 10 firms, we probably aren't, but let's say we did, and we were like, oh, we picked our top 3. Like, have we built in time to go through and whittle that down if we need it?
Yeah.
I think we just need to be aware of that. I'm not saying we have to change it right at this minute. We can shoot for that March 5th as being the discussion date, but I think we need to be aware that depending on what the response is, that may affect the outcome on the 5th.
You're just identifying a risk in the schedule.
Yeah, I'm just saying
risk.
that it may,
Okay.
I mean, and again, I know you said it was kind of a rough timeline anyway, but I just wanted to be kind of transparent about the fact that it might be a little,
Aggressive.
yeah, I mean, it might be. Depending on what
Can
we
just
find
have
out.
flexibility with it, because I'd like to keep it moving. So
Yeah.
I'm saying, so my thing is maybe it looks good until March 5th, and if we determine that when we come
Yep.
back here, we want to call people in, maybe we can
We'll
have
know
them in
that.
for the 18th meeting, and then following meeting them or answering any subsequent questions,
Right.
follow-ups. We could do that, but my hope is we're going to review these in advance, okay? And then we could ask Brian to go back and get
Sure.
any more questions and clarity from them.
Yeah.
And even if, I mean, I don't know that we need to look at it like, we're
No.
looking at it from when we interviewed for the lawyers, where we had to have a formal
Right.
interview process and then round two. I mean,
Was
that
a
was
lot.
a lot,
Mhm.
but I feel like this might give us enough time to have those questions requested and then have responses for them to
Sure.
discuss it. I don't know.
Okay.
I just feel like it's very aggressive of what we want them to do, that now if we're going to the middle of April, like, and we need to get this back and have this
Right.
back as a board.
Yeah, giving
we're
them
now,
enough
like,
time,
We've
but-
lost a month.
But giving us enough time to.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
being
just,
able-
I guess I didn't provide too much context to what I was working backwards from on this timeline, but I was really working backwards from June 1, because you're not gonna do a community process in June or July. And
Valid.
even more than that,
Right.
I heard it loud and clear from the board last time that you guys wanna make a decision on this by August 19th, because that would, to your point. So
Right.
you lose the summer. Now, if that's different, then talk about that and guide me differently, but I was working off of a June 1 deadline, because
Yeah.
you're not gonna have focus groups and surveys administered in the summertime. That'd be a bad idea.
We really
I
are
agree.
looking at, if we got them engaged, like March 18th, we're really looking at April and May. Like, they start April
That's
1st.
it.
And that's why, like, aggressively, I'm
break.
thinking no later than spring break, you have to have a company on board. Because if you stretch that into April, now you're really crunching the time that they have to
We're
do
like,
it, to do
that's
their
8
work.
weeks, which even seems
It's
aggressive.
really
That
aggressive,
seems aggressive.
With
really
all the
aggressive.
communities and,
very
I
aggressive.
think it's a plan, but even by the August, if we don't have, I mean, we've had this property for so long, we're trying to do it the right way, so, you know, to your point, we should move along, bearing in mind that we may need to shift gears or modify as we see fit.
but I really think it's important we keep to that August deadline, knowing with, if that's something that we're gonna wanna do with the referendum. I think that it has to be key there. I mean, we might decide as a board that we don't wanna do the referendum, or
Right.
we wanna put it in the spring, or push it off there. But I really like the swiftness, I mean, I feel like we've been sitting on this so long, like, I mean, let's just get to it, let's get 8 weeks and bang it out.
But please clarify, it's a referendum question.
Correct.
And not, like, to go to, like, a referendum to
An
get
actual
more
referendum.
money.
Right, but
Right.
it is a
Like,
referendum.
I mean, some people, when you just say referendum,
Yeah.
some people may just take it
The
as like they're
context.
going
Okay,
for
well,
it.
thank you for clarifying.
So,
Right,
but-
it's a referendum question for the ballot.
Right.
That we had discussed
Right.
last meeting.
I think they call that a
Usually called-
non-binding advisory
yeah,
question.
advisory, right.
Yeah, non-binding advisory question.
But didn't he say it was it was considered a
It's a
referendum?
type of referendum, yeah, but
Okay, but not
to
a
Michael's
money.
point, it's not the traditional sense referendum that many people will talk
Okay,
about.
so-
But I think regardless, we're in a good place to move forward, so then we can get to March 5th, we'll see what we get back, and if we need a little bit of time, we can
adjust.
talk about it, but I think
At
everybody
that March 5th meeting.
is
sure.
eager to start a process while school is still in session.
Yeah,
Great.
agreed.
Maybe we add a date between March, or February 26th and March 5th for us to review the proposals and then get you questions. Maybe that Wednesday, like the 28th, you know, if any.
Like, we could have some internal deadlines in
Correct.
terms of, right, yeah, I mean,
Would
that
you
makes
say, Joe,
sense.
between February 26th and March 5th?
Like maybe February 28th, if any, you know, we would have any questions we would want in follow-up to those, to what we've received, and then for them to get back to us to present at the meeting on March 5th. So,
Okay.
you know, that would give us 48 hours to review them, 48 hours for them to respond to any questions we might have, and then we would have all the information.
For the 5th meeting.
Right.
Yep, that makes sense. It's tight.
But we have an extra day in February, so that's a positive.
Oh, right, the 29th, leap year.
Amazing. All right, we good?
Does Tim have anything else?
Tim?
Still
Tim?
there?
No, I'm good. I've been listening. I appreciate all the input, and I agree with going forward.
Thank you.
Awesome. Are you good, Brian?
I think I've got everything I need. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, so all set with that, and then now is the second opportunity. No, we don't have anybody? Nope. All right, there you go.
Do you mind if I fix it?
That's fine.
Please.
Yeah, yeah.
So, baton, I don't know. So I'm Ryan Grayson, the village administrator for Willow Springs, so I appreciate you letting me come up. One thing I wanted to point out, and I think I've received a significant amount of feedback from the Pleasantdale community. You guys are trying to with the rest of the LT community, very positive. There's been a lot of conversation back and forth. The board is really hesitant to make a decision, and I understand your position in that as well right now. But you're missing a really key component. You guys keep jumping over the fact of getting an appraisal. And my thought on that here is that if you do not obtain an appraisal before you take the time and the money to go out and engage the whole community on what should we do with this parcel of land. Should we sell it? Should we keep it? It was mentioned maybe it should be a nature preserve, right? A whole range from keeping it and utilizing it somewhere in the district to selling it. And I don't think anybody can make an educated decision if they don't know what it's worth, because there's people that